passiamo a Tim Huda, che si è occupato dei Balcani scrivendo per l'Economist, con una rubrica online, Eastern Approaches. È autore di 3 libri sulla zona balcanica: West Serbs, History, Myth and Destruction of Yugoslavia and Kosovo, War and Revenge, il terzo è Kosovo, What Everyone Needs to Know, che è stato pubblicato nel 2008. Dal 90 al 91 ha vissuto a Bucarest, ha seguito come corrispondente per il Times e l'Economist il momento del crollo dell'area comunista, quindi del muro, e successivamente si è trasferito a Belgrado per seguire sia per il Times che l'Economist la guerra nell'ex Jugoslavia. È tornato a Londra dal 95, ma continua a viaggiare nella regione. Nel 2009 è stato Senior Visiting Research Fellow per la Southeast European Research Unit al European Institute of London School of Economics, dove ha sviluppato il concetto di Jugosfera, sul quale lo interrogeremo tra poco. Dal settembre 2011 è stato corrispondente sempre per l'Economist e per la New York Review of Books in diverse parti del mondo: Afghanistan, Iraq, Corea del Nord, Darfur, Haiti. È stato in Georgia, dove ha seguito la guerra secessionista, in Abkhazia, Ossetia del Sud, e in Armenia, altra zona dimenticata del mondo, dove il conflitto è solo dimenticato dai media, ma prosegue, che è la guerra in Nagorno-Karabakh tra Armenia e Azerbaijan, nata ai tempi dell'Unione Sovietica. Nel 2012 ha scritto diversi articoli sulla Scozia, altra regione che punta alla secessione, ad avere il 75% di tasse che rimangono seriamente nella loro piccola terra. A lui chiederei, con una battuta, per anni si è parlato di jugonostalgia o nostalgia, adesso lui ha sviluppato questo concetto di jugosfera. Che valenza positiva può avere per quell'area e anche per la nostra percezione di quell'area questa jugosfera? Tim Huda.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to the Yugosphere at the end. It's something I've talked about in the past, and but I'm not going to speak mainly about that now. I think that it's quite important to do a sort of tour d'horizon of the region, because it is a region that in many ways has changed, and it's quite important because sometimes people kind of concentrate on one country, and basically they're all connected, so you have to do this kind of tour d'horizon. First of all, before we start, I just want to tell you that this picture is a sculpture which was commissioned by the Kosovo government. And just remember this, because I'm going to refer to this, and they used it they put it in the middle of centre of Pristina to celebrate the end of so-called supervised independence towards the end of last year. And interestingly, since you're talking about memory, it is in this kind of iconic, or it was placed in this kind of iconic place in the centre of Pristina, because just on the one side you have the famous Kosovo National Library, which was so controversial in the past, and on the other side you can see just the outlines of the unfinished Serbian Orthodox Cathedral. So it is placed in this kind of iconic part of, or this area of Pristina, which has so many important memories, different memories for different people. Now, Slovenes don't like to think that they're in the Balkans. Probably they're not in the Balkans. Technically speaking, they're not. And of course, Slovenia was, for the last 20 years, probably one of the most boring countries in Europe. And this is the front of the Slovene Parliament. But it's quite important to start with Slovenia, because it's really coming back. I mean, it has never left this region, but it's really coming back in a way with a vengeance. Its banks are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Its prime minister is on trial for corruption. And also, since this is something that you mentioned that was happening in other parts of the region, its politicians have been doing in the last year something which they didn't do in Slovenia over the last 20 years, but they've now started doing, arguing about who did what in 1941. So for all of its being an EU and NATO member, the crisis in Europe the crisis in Europe has simply exposed the fact that for many years Slovenia just failed to tackle its real problems. It just simply swept them under the carpet, and those problems include pensions, bankrupt banks, and demographics. All of these problems are problems which are similar in the rest of the region, and actually, funnily enough, not necessarily so different from here in Italy. 3 weeks ago, the Anti-Corruption Commission found irregularities in the affairs of both the Prime Minister and Zoran Jankovic, the Mayor of Ljubljana, the leader of the largest opposition party, and the country is really in a deep crisis. Why is this important to the rest of the region, to the Balkans proper? Because Slovenia is extremely integrated as one of the biggest investors in the whole region. It's a country that others have seen as the sort of pathfinder, the leader in many respects, especially in terms of EU integration, despite the blocking role it's played with Croatia. But the point is that whatever's wrong in Slovenia in terms of economy, cronyism, etc., is wrong multiple times over as you head south. This is Vesna Pusic, the foreign minister of Croatia. She's smiling, of course, because in theory Croatia will join the EU on the 1st of July 2013. But as I say, Slovenia is so deeply integrated into the region. I don't think this is going to happen, but I would like to raise the possibility, which other people are talking about, is that the crisis is so bad in Slovenia that if the government collapses, if there's no agreement on the outstanding banking issue with Croatia, then if the government collapses, the government won't make an agreement with Croatia, which it needs to do. Its parliament won't be able to ratify its EU accession, and Croatia won't join the EU on the 1st of July 2013. It's still an unlikely possibility, but it's still possible that that is going to happen. This is Split. I just have this picture of the slightly elderly person because I wanted to bring out this point that demographics across the region are really terrible. People have been either emigrating or just getting older, and Croatia is no exception. It's perhaps even worse in Croatia. 20 years ago it had 4.7 million people, now it has 4.29 million. Most of the Serbs have gone, of course, but also if people have one child and you have no immigration, then your population is going to shrink. The economy is also in deep trouble, although last year they had a very good tourist season. Of course, tourism is one of the major industries of Croatia. I have to say, though, that and I don't think that they will be saying this publicly, one of the reasons that Croatia did so well was thanks to the Arab Spring, really. It was because a lot of people who might have gone on holiday in Tunisia or in Egypt decided that they would rather perhaps go somewhere on the safer side of the Mediterranean. So, good for Croatia, of course, but okay, I'm just saying, as they say. Montenegro, let's move a little bit further south. In terms of EU integration, actually, Montenegro has been, which is actually quite a good measure. It's begun accession negotiations in summer. And quantitatively, the difference between having candidate status, which is what Serbia and Macedonia have, is that you really are on track. But elections last October has left power in the hands of the ruling DPS party, and Milo Đukanović, whose name you can see in the centre there, is back as Prime Minister. I mean, he never really left power, and he must be, I suppose, the person in Europe, the politician in Europe, who's really been in power either at the forefront as Prime Minister or President or in the background since the late 80s. So he must be the politician in Europe now with the longest staying power. And I think the thing about Montenegro to remember is that many people actually don't believe that change is actually possible. Last year I wrote a piece and the helpful editor changed what I'd written to since independence in 2006, no government has changed peacefully through the ballot box. But what I actually wrote was that no government in history, in the whole history of Montenegro, has ever changed peacefully through the ballot box. The issue that everyone always comes back to, which is a legitimate issue to look at, is organised crime and corruption. This is Budva, and the unfinished building that you can see there is called Zabala. And this was a case which is quite interesting, where the mayor and his deputy were put in prison over this scheme. Although the mayor said when he was put into prison, and that he was actually a scapegoat, and that he was being sent to a prison in a show trial designed to show the EU that something was actually being done, when in fact he was a sort of political, he or his deputy were political enemies of the current Prime Minister. Not to say that people aren't doing anything about it. This is Vanja Chalovic, who runs an NGO which is dealing with crime and corruption, and in the centre you can see the name of Darko Šarić, one of the most infamous of drug traffickers in the region, and all the connections that she has made from of Mr. Šarić, who's a fugitive, throughout the region. What you can't see is behind her head is that she has a little post-it note for Mr. Đukanović, but there is no connection that she has made. But clearly that's something that she is looking for, and that's the bank, the family bank of Mr. Đukanović, through which a lot of government business is now funneled. This is the Bosnia that we'd all like to see. This is a postcard from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But of course, unfortunately, it's not like that. This is a sort of perhaps a sort of fairy tale image we would like to have of Bosnia. Usually, when we talk about Bosnia, when we journalists talk about Bosnia, when politicians talk about Bosnia, it's always the worst crisis ever. And you know, maybe it is, but as Refik has said, after the positive years of the early 2000s, progress has really stalled since 2006 with the sinking of the so-called April package of constitutional changes, and things have gone backwards. Talk of a referendum on independence in the Republika Srpska doesn't go away, and it began again. It came again with a vengeance 3 weeks ago when Mr. Dodik began talking about it again on the occasion of the 21st anniversary of the foundation of Republika Srpska, by declaring that the country was not in the interest of Serbs and that it should not exist, is what he said. But I can't really see how Republika Srpska could leave without war, or at least violence, and I suspect that this time Bosniaks would not be unprepared, and the Republika Srpska, after all, is not an easy piece of territory to defend, and might end as some form of Transnistria on the Balkans. This was at a ceremony of memorial in a small Serb village close to Srebrenica this summer. I'm sorry, I've got one or two pictures mixed up, but this is partly related to memory, this picture, but it partly relates to another problem, a serious problem of Bosnia, one of the problems why the country is so bankrupt. This is in Tuzla, and all of these signs that you can see here are the associations of war veterans of one form or another, who have become such an important political lobby in the country, and effectively are draining the country and the parts of the country of much needed money. Again, the problem with Bosnia, like other countries, is demographics, emigration, elderly populations. Now, fast forwarding slightly, coming back to this issue of memory, this is the ceremony in Srebrenica this year, in which I think, last year, 2012, in which about 500 people, the remains of about 500 were buried. And now, I do agree with Refik, and I have actually got some pictures of positive things in Bosnia. But I want to say that I want to kind of make this point, which I think this is important when it comes to sort of memory and the transformation of memory. I think that Srebrenica is changing in a sense that Srebrenica is becoming, bad enough as it was, it's changing into something else in terms of Bosniak memory and identity. And I think that will have long-term effects for the future. And what I want to say is that whatever you think of what Israeli politicians do, you have to remember that they do have in the background these kind of Auschwitz effect and never again, and it is kind of lodged in a political DNA. And in that sense, Srebrenica is, I think, increasingly to play that and will play that in the future in Bosniak political DNA. So I think that's something to bear in mind. But as I said, that there are also, positive things as well, and normal life continues. I mean, a few years ago, you didn't have ordinary shopping centres like this in the centre of, or the epicenter of Sarajevo, which was also the epicenter of the siege. And I also think that funny thing is happening in Bosnia is that I think that we talk about Bosnia in kind of relatively gloomy terms, but I think that all over Bosnia there are quite positive things happening which actually don't get reported and nobody knows about. And this is Tuzla. Now, I chose Tuzla, and I think that this is partly because you have mayors and people outside of Sarajevo and outside of Banja Luka who think, we just got to get on with the rest of our lives. And this is Tuzla. Now, these lakes didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago. They're just totally artificial saltwater lakes with water pumped in. They've created this thing. They're pumping in water from 40 kilometers away. They've created beaches in Tuzla. I mean, beaches in Tuzla. But it's great because it means that if you can't afford to go on a week on holiday on the Dalmatian coast, you can come to Tuzla. People are coming on holiday in Tuzla. I mean, in the centre, not quite the centre, but you know what I mean, the centre of Bosnia, going to the beach, and you can spend, €1 and spend the whole day on the beach. But there are things like this happening in other parts. Somebody told me recently, I haven't checked this myself, but I think it's true, is in Gorazde, they've got full employment. You think, well, how is that possible? They've got full employment in Gorazde, of all places. Apparently there are factories making things, car seats for cars made, the rest of the car made in Germany. And workers are coming from Republika Srpska to this part of the Federation. So there are all sorts of things which are happening out there which are not being reported. So I'm not minimizing the sort of general gloom one feels about Bosnia sometimes, but there are interesting things happening in the rest of the country. Macedonia, perpetually forgotten. This is the Alexander the Great memorial in the centre of Skopje. An EU candidate since 2006, but simply just stuck thanks to the name argument with Greece, which has been going on for more than 20 years, and which has sapped so much energy from political life in Macedonia and between Macedonia and Greece. Until 2008, the Macedonians didn't really take the history bait, so to speak, from the Greeks. But now, for their own political reasons, perhaps, they've really sort of taken this up with a vengeance. The whole of Skopje is being transformed with these new constructions, new buildings everywhere, and this glorification of this kind of ancient Macedonian past. And of course, Macedonia isn't only the state of the Macedonians. A quarter of the population is Albanian. and they are an important political lobby in the country. So on the Albanian side of town, as you can see, the workmen have moved in. That's Skanderbeg there. Workmen have moved in, and they're building a big Albanian kind of square, which will perhaps, they will also have its own statues, although the now planned 30-meter high statue of Mother Teresa, of Calcutta, who of course was an Albanian nun who came from Skopje, is apparently planned not on the Albanian side, but will go close to Alexander the Great. So we'll have this massive Alexander with a massive Mother Teresa next door. Sorry, where am I going back? Next door to Macedonia, of course, Kosovo. The fact that supervised independence ended last year is a rather good sign. I think that it means that progress has been made. This is Peter Feith, who headed the International Civilian Organization, announcing that he was leaving. That's Hashim Thaci, the Prime Minister of Kosovo, saying goodbye. But of course a lot of Kosovars are not so happy with the state of their country. This was something that went around on a satire which went around at the time on Facebook, implying that the country is, as it says, a place beyond repair. I don't think it's beyond repair at all, but that's what some Kosovars think. In 2008, at the time of independence, all sorts of doomsday scenarios were imagined. There would be violence, there would be a new Serb exodus, etc., etc. There was a flare-up of violence in 2011, but actually things have been remarkably smooth in Kosovo, all things considered. 2/3 of Serbs, about 130,000 people in total, live in the south. They don't live in barbed wire enclaves, which is the enduring image from a decade ago, and increasingly those people and their institutions are being integrated into Kosovo's own institutions. That's not the case in the north. This is the bridge in Mitrovica, where the north, which is predominantly Serb with about 50,000 people, is still very much under Serbian control. And this is the famous bridge of Mitrovica. This is the view from the Albanian side of the south, and this is the same point looking from the north, from the Serbian side down to the Albanian side in the south. But actually, EU talks, sponsored talks, began in March 2011, and frankly, they've been pretty successful. The prime ministers have met 4 times in the last few months. The presidents, the president of Serbia, the former Serbian extreme radical, will be meeting the president of Kosovo in perhaps 2 weeks. These things were like inconceivable a few years ago. So, I think there are some positive things happening there as well. In terms of population, Kosovo is not exempt from the demographic problems, although it has a relatively young population, but people until recently believed, that Albanians always thought that there were about 2.3 million people in the country, but the census revealed there's about 1.7 million, which is almost certainly thanks to immigration. So just one more picture from the north of Mitrovica, the Serbian north. This is an example of where actually discussion and agreement can yield a compromise. Serbia, after independence, said that tried to prevent Kosovo going from regional conferences because it didn't like refused to accept Republic of Kosovo. I don't want to go into details, but here you can see the little sign. It says Kosovo asterisk. Okay, it's not great for Kosovo, but it means that Serbia doesn't have to walk out of conferences. Kosovo can take part in them. And the asterisk makes reference to UN resolutions and the International Court of Justice, judgment or opinion, rather, that the Kosovo's Declaration of Independence was not illegal. But what I want to say is that where there's a will, there's a way. They can make a deal. Albania, stuck, of course, has been stuck for years. The whole country, perhaps, hostage to the two clashing personalities of Edi Rama, the leader of the Socialist Party, and Sali Berisha, the Prime Minister. And for years, really, its whole EU integration process has been held up because of this rivalry, which is such a shame, because basically Albania doesn't have any of the major problems of anyone else. It doesn't. I mean, it has economic problems like everybody else, although the statistics show that it hasn't had a recession. But never mind. Key thing to remember about Albania is that 1/3 of its population, that's not 1/3 of the workforce, but 1/3 of its whole population are abroad, most in Greece, but of course there are a lot here. Remittances are falling, but still, you might have expected large numbers to have returned, but actually large numbers of people have not returned. But still a tragedy that the country is just stuck because of this kind of endless kind of clash of personalities, and the fact that the country is so riven in two. Moving to Serbia, that's Boris Tadic, the former president of Serbia, now rather fading from memory since he lost power last year. This is the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, Mr. Dacic, a former spokesman of Milosevic, but this is the man who is leading these successful talks with Hashim Thaci, who you saw a few slides back. Actually, this new government has been rather surprising if you consider that it's led by a former spokesman of Milosevic and people who were extreme nationalists like the president. I'm going to come on to that in a little bit, but you know, as I said, the talks with Kosovo are progressing. Anti-corruption has become, I mean, some people like to say that there is a saying which is that anti-corruption is the new nationalism, and I think that will be true not just for Serbia but for the whole of the region. The biggest tycoon has been arrested, but things are moving on that front. Economically, things are as bad as anywhere else, 24% unemployment and double-digit recession, thanks to the fact that the country is, like the rest of the region, so deeply tied in, economically tied in to the Eurozone. But, you know, in the part, they're also, this is some of the new infrastructure of Serbia. It's not a vast amount, but this is the new bridge in Belgrade. And this, actually, is something which I don't know if you are aware of, but is something which is, should be brought to everybody's attention. Fake asylum seekers risk everything. It's an attempt to prevent or dissuade people from claiming asylum and basically abusing the Schengen system, which means that Serbs, Macedonians, Bosnians, etc. no longer need visas to travel to the rest of Europe. Especially for Serbia and for Macedonia, the visa-free travel is now under threat, because so many thousands of people have been trekking to Germany, especially Sweden, Luxembourg, Belgium, claiming asylum, which is, of course, completely fake. Okay? In effect, 95% are Roma. Various countries they go to various countries because they know that certain countries are quite slow at dealing with their applications, and they can live for 3 or 4 months on decent benefits, decent social security benefits. But the net result is that the whole Schengen free travel system for Serbia and Macedonia is now under threat. And of course, there's not much that Serbia and Macedonia can do about this, because it's the fault of countries like Germany, who have had until now stupid systems whereby it takes ages to claim, it takes ages to decide, and they don't have Serbia and Macedonia and other countries on a list of safe countries for basically deciding within a week this person is serious or this person is not serious. Problem for Serbia, problem for everybody else, as I said, aging populations, poverty. But now, what I really want to talk about is something I know I'm kind of running out of time, but I want to make a few points which actually begin here. Remember that Greece, until 1949, was just a Balkan country like any other. I think what's happened over the last few years is we've had a kind of trajectory of Greece's return to the Balkans and the Balkans return to Europe. And at a certain point in the last year or so, or the last 2 or 3 years, we've had this kind of crossover. So the strange thing that's happened is that in the last 10 years or 20 years, we've been able to talk with various years. Bosnia is the black hole of Europe, or Serbia is the black hole of Europe, or Kosovo is the black hole of Europe. But now what's happened is that effectively we've got Greece as the black hole of Europe, and the countries of the Balkans, which were the ones which were at war, which were unstable, have actually been pretty stable, while the rest of Europe around them is actually changing. I mean, it's quite remarkable if you think about it that you have the heirs of Milosevic and Šešelj as leaders in Serbia, but you have still a relatively very stable region where you have the Greeks electing neo-Nazis, and we've had rioting in the past, not so much in the last few months, the last year, but Greece, well actually I think there has been some violence in Greece recently. You've got Slovenia in a state of collapse. So as I said, we've had this state of convergence and crossover between Europeanization and Balkanization. Now, the Greek effect is fundamental and yet to work itself out. But what it is basically a Balkan country which proved to be rotten on the inside. And its example, and the long-term issue is that what we have here is an example of a country which was simulating Europeanization, and it proved it simply couldn't work anymore. It was the country that pretended and lied in the end, and in the end it simply imploded under the weight of trying to keep up. The political impact of that is yet to be seen. To what extent will countries in the future say, well, look, if Greece, which was a member of an EU country since the 70s, a NATO member since, I can't remember when, was so corrupt and rotten on the inside, the other countries must be worse. We actually haven't seen that yet, but I'm just pointing that out. Within the region, within the region, I think it's true to say, and it's important to point out, that when it comes to joining the EU and moving ahead, the romantic vision has gone. But I think what the Croatian referendum on joining the EU showed last December was that Croats who were quite Eurosceptic proved that they are perhaps people in Croatia, and I suspect in the rest of the region, are simply realists. It's simply just better, they think, to be on the inside of the tent and on the outside. And who knows, maybe at the end of the crisis we're going to see a much stronger EU emerge, although we don't know exactly what form that will take. And one of the reasons it's so important for the region to continue this process is that you can't pretend that the region is like that these countries could ever be like Norway or Switzerland, exist somehow outside. It's effectively, the region is small, it's economically insignificant. As I said, it's a population, I keep repeating this because it's important and people don't talk about it enough. Its populations are old and declining, and think about it in a globalized world. The whole population of the Western Balkans is 22, 23 million, which is less than the municipality of Shanghai. And I think that it's quite important to kind of bear that in mind in this kind of globalized world, especially when one's talking about the Balkans. And it's important, when I talk about economically, what's important is to point out is that the fact that the region is suffering today is in a way entirely predictable, in the sense that it's always prospered, done well, when the rest of Europe, when the sort of core markets of it's to play that and will play that in the future in Bosniak political DN or Germany were doing well, and this was true in the 30s, and it's true again today. The whole region is entirely locked into the fortunes of the rest of Europe economically, and effectively there is absolutely no capacity within the region to change that. I think I've gone ahead too far. Okay, there is no capacity to change that. When it comes to EU enlargement, what's interesting is that although people talk about enlargement fatigue, the interesting thing is that there is actually no evidence that it's actually happening. As I said, Croatia is joining, unless Slovenia blocks it. Serbia and Montenegro are moving ahead. And while other countries like Macedonia and Bosnia are stuck, they are stuck for their own reasons. They're not stuck because of enlargement fatigue. But the problem when it comes to talking about the rest of the region, and when it comes to talking about and its European future, is effectively that we don't know what sort of Europe we're going to have when the rest of the region joins. It will have taken, assuming that Croatia joins on the 1st of July 2013, or this year, it would have taken 12 years and 4 months from the beginning of the process to joining. How many years will it take for the rest of the region to join? How many years will it take Serbia or Bosnia or Kosovo to join? When Croatia joins, it will be joining an organisation which is completely different from the one that it thought it was joining. And so, do we know what Europe is going to look like in a year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years? We don't. And the fate of the region is completely tied up with the fate of the EU, the Euro, and the Eurozone. Will there be a new kind of inner core part, sort of, as we are in fact moving in that direction, a kind of inner core of much more tightly knit, a much more tightly knit political and fiscal union of the Eurozone countries? Will there be a sort of outer core in which the Balkan countries will perhaps join? And what sort of outer core will that be? Will it be sort of second-tier Europe, or will it be one which is actually also important because it will contain Britain, or will Britain no longer be there? This is the thing. We don't know. We don't know where the Balkans are heading because we don't know where Europe is heading. And as I keep pointing out, the fate of the Balkans has entirely changed the fate of Europe, and this region has absolutely no influence on the way things will move in Europe and what will happen. What is for sure, though, is that others will vie for influence in the region, especially as Europe is seen to fail, seen to be in difficulties. Turkey certainly has in the last few years talked a lot about its relationship with the Western Balkans, but in fact has done very, very little. It has very little investment there, and whereas a few years ago it was fashionable to talk about a neo-Ottoman foreign policy, I think we can safely say that for now that is completely buried beneath the rubble of Aleppo. Russia too has played its cards within the region. It kind of supports Serbia over Kosovo. It has quite important economic interests, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really have that much influence. Still, even as I said, this new government in Serbia, which is kind of one would have thought quite Russian friendly. And the president of Serbia has talked about, he says, the only country I love more than Serbia is Russia itself. But actually, what are they doing? The Minister of Defense, a man from his own party, Alexander Vucic, has been in the US consolidating ties between the Serbian military and the US military, and European integration is going full steam ahead, which is one reason you can explain why Serbia is being so cooperative in these talks with Kosovo, because they desperately want to get open negotiations with the EU starting in June this year. I'm not sure that they'll get it, but I suspect that they will get it by the end of the year. Now, I've already run out of time, but just a few brief words, since you've talked about the Yugosphere. All I wanted to say when I described this idea that I happened to term the Yugosphere was what it is, was simply the re-knitting together of so many of the broken relationships of the last, that were broken during the wars. It's a partly political, but it's especially social, cultural, and in terms of business. And I think I will almost end with this slide. Now, if you know, perhaps you don't know, this is a kind of sweet which everybody knows in the region, quite a popular sweet, but it is the kind of essence of the Yugosphere in the sense that this is a sweet which is owned, which is made by a company called Atlantic Grupa, which is quite an important company in Croatia. The Atlantic Grupa bought a company in Slovenia. The company, an important company in Slovenia. The important company in Slovenia already owned several companies in Serbia, which made various products, coffee, snacks, various types of food, etc., which in turn were distributed all over the former Yugoslavia. This is a kind of quintessence, especially in terms of business, of what the Yugosphere is about and what it means. At the end of the day, populations that 2 million here, 1 million here, 650,000 there, but you really have a kind of sensible core market of 20, 23 million people, and that's why it's important for business, but it's also important in all sorts of other ways, and in sorts of ways which are boring, and people don't realize how much is actually happening, how much soldiers meet, every week, how much soldiers are training together, ostensibly to go on UN peacekeeping missions, but effectively kind of restoring context, how much policemen are working together, how much judges are working together, how much kind of legislation is being harmonized so that ordinary criminals can't just flee 20 kilometers down the road to another former Yugoslav country to escape extradition. All these things are happening, and I think that they are quite positive, and I think that they have made a significant difference, but I don't want to over-exaggerate. I don't think this is an irreversible process, and I think that you have this kind of Yugosphere which kind of covers another reality of these ethnic spheres. There's a Serbian sphere which goes from Drvar in the Federation of Bosnia Herzegovina, which is a Serbian majority town, where people wake up in the morning and watch Serbian TV. They send their kids to university in Belgrade, and it goes all the way down to the most southernmost enclave of Kosovo, Serbian enclave of Kosovo. You have Bosniak sphere, which will go from Sanjak to Sarajevo. You have a Croatian sphere. Everyone has their own spheres. So you have these kind of competing spheres. I hope that this Yugosphere, which as I say, some people may not like the name, it doesn't matter, you can call it whatever you like, but I just think this is something kind of relatively positive. But as I say, you have so many things in play at the moment, especially the future of Europe, that we can only hope for the best. We can only hope for a future which is good for the rest for this region, where the positive things which I've described will triumph. But let's hope. But as I say, that whole region is tied to the future of Europe itself. And let's hope that the future of Europe too is positive. So that's that. Thank you.
Grazie a Team Giuda. Prima di dare il là appunto al coffee break, vi prego solo di avere un attimo di attenzione per una bella e interessante mostra di alcuni nostri giovani artisti provenienti dalla Accademia d'Arte di Bagnaluca. Li chiamo per nome, li faccio alzare, sono Mensur, Selma e Ferdi, che sono qua in prima fila, e vi chiedo di dare un'occhiata alle loro croste, ai loro quadri, e Nulla, mi pare che sia anche possibile parlare con loro, approfondire il discorso se li possono cedere. Ecco, insomma, non so se avete colto questo giro di parole, per cui diamo appunto il via al coffee break e se potete date un'occhiata anche a quello che hanno fatto i nostri ragazzi. Buon proseguimento, ci vediamo tra un quarto d'ora.